So, so far, I guess you would have seen the base SAS platform, and then probably enterprise guide so far, right? At different clients that you worked so far. Then now let's talk about what does the API platform have in general, and then we'll slowly get into what are the tools associated, and then what are the packages that are available, and how you move code from one location to another, and so on. So at the heart of the EBI platform, we have a server called metadata server. It's basically the place where you store metadata of all your jobs or of all your libraries or any type of objects that an EBI platform requires. Okay, so you can think that it's a central repository where you store all your definitions and your job definitions and so on. So that is what the metadata server comprises of. And then, so if we start from the left corner, so every EBI platform, it will definitely have a server tag. It will have a few clients. If we are going to use the portal, then it should have the web tier. And if you're dealing with datasets or any DBMS type of relational data structures, then it interfaces with the data tier. Okay, and now of the server tag, you see that the metadata server is the primary thing. Without this, the EBI platform is nothing. Then, apart from the metadata server, you have the stored process server, and the key server is the workspace server. Basically, that's where your SAS code runs. SAS share server that would help you to share data between your applications. The object spawner is it's a service, which actually listens what are the requests coming from different clients. Like say the clients could be MS Add-in or Infomaps or web browser. So that is the service that will actually sync up. Listen to what is the request coming from the client, and it processes. It sends the authentication to the metadata server, and then depending upon the job type, it will start execute on the workspace server and so on. So apart from that, we have the SAS foundation. That is your base SAS component. So that is where you have all your SAS libraries or all the backend code that would achieve the data processing. And apart from that, we have
Is that I can ask you a question or no?
Yeah.
Okay. So the object spanner. So that means the client will interact with the object spanner to interact with the metadata server. Is it something like a layer between metadata server and the client tier?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
So think of all of these as services. Okay. So everything is a service, which is listening to a request on a port. So if you understand the networking terminology, so any request is sent to a particular IP address, right? So in terms of server, these are services that are listening at a port. A port number is literally the IP address for that server. So this particular server on that port listens to a request coming in from a web browser or an add-in, and then it passes the authentication parameters like the username and password. It goes and sends it to the metadata repository and checks on that repository if that particular person has a valid metadata identity or not. If it is, then it sends to the next. And depending upon the job, it sends to the next workspace server or stored process server and so on. So object spawner is the one. And there is another server called Connect server, SAS Connect server. So this is the server that listens to all of your remote SQL Pack 2 type of queries. So this is a service that will see, okay, oh, there's a proxy SQL, there's a remote SQL pass-through that you need to send to the data tier. So that is the service that recognizes it and so on. So in any installation of EBI, you would see these services. And yeah, I'll show you all these services.
Okay, Sharath,
I mean, yeah.
Sorry, I have one more question. So when you say that the SAS Connect and everything, so where comes the SAS Access then?
SAS Access? SAS Access is the one, it uses the SAS Connect on the back end, but SAS Access are products of SAS, which will, try to convert our SAS-based code into the native SQL language code. So it's a bunch of APIs in the sense, you could think like
interface, yeah.
macros where you're passing parameters, and that macro is the one that takes your code and converts that into PLSQL type of code, and that code is submitted on the, the RDMS. And that RDMS, when it sends the data, so that data is again converted into the proprietary SAS 7B DAT, and that is when you see it as a data set. So the SAS Access is a product that accomplishes all of that in the background.
Okay.
So, I mean, I'm thinking, it will be worthwhile showing you at this point what are different servers that are running as a service when you see as an installation. So we talked about the Connect spawner, the SAS Connect, and then we talked about the object spawner, right? And similarly, when we're dealing with OLAP cubes, then we use the OLAP server. The metadata server runs on its own, and the web tier has all these services like web infrastructure, web app server, and then you have the web server running in the background and so on. So these are the different servers that are running, to accomplish all the tasks that you do with Enterprise Guide or a web browser or something like that. Okay, all of them are interconnected and they execute on these servers. Okay. Now let me go on. Now the second thing is the client tier. Okay. The clients could be the MS add-on, Enterprise Guide that you're familiar, web browser. Basically, if you want to see any report on Web Report Studio or anything on the portal, so you would interact with the web browser. And then there's something called Infomap Studio, which actually creates, for us, as a client, it creates Infomaps for us. And then, it sends that code to the backend through the Connect server, and then, processing happens on the workspace server or the store processor. Okay, we'll talk about those interactions a little bit further down the lane, but just try to understand what are the components that are part of the EBI platform. Apart from that, there's this tool called SAS Management Console. This is the tool where all the SAS admins, they try to configure every metadata element or any server that is part of the EBI platform. You configure the ports, you configure what could be the server name, what could be the workspace server name, like SAS app that you see at your client site. Everything can be configured using this SAS Management Console. And if you're a SAS admin, then your primary objective or primary roles and responsibilities would revolve around using this tool called SAS Management Console. As a developer, your interaction with SAS Management Console would be very limited, in the sense, assigning the proper security permissions and creating data libraries, if you will. That is what that we do as a developer. But that for an admin, it's the tool that they need. Without that, they can't do anything. Those are the components of the client tier. And then the next thing is, if we are planning to have a portal, then these are the components that go onto the portal. Okay. So if you want to execute any stored process, then you need the stored process web application. And the web tier is completely based on Java JDK, SDK, and Java Virtual Machine, JVMs, and so on. So basically, the web tier requires like an Apache server for delivering your results to you, and a Tomcat server. Since it's a Java-based platform, Tomcat server is a JSP machine, and most of the code that that your objects work on, they are based on JSP on the web tier. So that's the reason why they need a Java servlet container. Apart from that, we have SAS Web Reports View. That's a tool that you would use to configure reports. We'll talk about that in our class as well. And coming to the last is the data tier. The data tier could be Excel reports, Excel or RDBMS tables like Oracle or MySQL, Teradata, whatever it is. Interaction with SAS datasets, OLAP cubes, and SPD files. These are called scalable performance data files. So basically, it's like in the RDBMS world, we call it, a table has been partitioned by a particular field. In SAS, we have something similar called, scalable performance data files. Basically, you partition all those data files based on a certain partition key. And then we have the ERP structures like, SAS has a product called SAS Access to SAP as well. So that is where we have these ERP data structures and so on. And any other database that can read using ODBC connectors, that's also possible using this SAS BI platform. Okay. Any questions till this point? Now, another thing that you'll have to understand in this particular graph is, if you see one level up, right, all the client tier, all of these are Windows-based clients. In the sense, you need proper Windows systems. There's no Mac, SAS or Mac products. It's basically everything is Windows. Okay. And then the web tier is basically you can install them on a Windows machines, Windows servers, or Unix servers. Okay. The data tier could be any of these combinations, any of the OS combinations, Windows, Unix, Linux, ZOS, anything. SAS can read data files on mainframe as well, or through ODBC connections, it can read any RDBMS products on Linux, Unix, or Windows. And on the server side, it's the same concept. These can be all of these servers. They can be installed on one of these OSs. But the client tier is definitely just Windows. You won't see any Mac products. Okay. Any questions? That's a high-level overview of the EBI platform and what are the components that are under it. And during this class, we're going to discuss most of these Windows clients and interactions with the server tier and the data tier. Okay, moving to the next slide. Any questions so far? Okay. So, some text around this. The SAS architecture, it integrates all of these products and data warehousing, business intelligence, analytical intelligence into one platform. And this platform has a common integrated metadata environment. That is what we were talking about, the metadata server. A single point of administration. When we say single point of administration, everything can be configured using the SAS management console. So that is what they're referring to when they say single point of administration. Common security and access control. So using the management console, when you right-click on any of those objects, you will be asked for authorization. So that is where you would configure, which metadata identity has access to those, to your objects, libraries, or data sets. Anything can be configured using the management console. So security is also considered. And it's a cross-platform approach. What it means is, you can install them on different OSs and, try to get your things done. And an integrated suite of applications. I mean, you have Informaps Studio to create Informap, OLAP Cube Studio to create OLAP Cube, and so on. So all of these are integrated suite of applications. And Enterprise Guide is the one major tool that can sew all of them together. And we'll see during our course how well we can use Enterprise Guide to execute most of these objects that you create in the BI platform. Okay, let's talk about EBI tools here. And it's the same slide as the first slide, but presented in a different way. On the metadata server is key to everything. On the metadata server, every object is identified by a repository. Okay, by default, when SAS has been installed on your system, you will see a repository called Foundation. Okay, most of the big clients, they try to allocate different repositories for different groups, but then if it's say like 500, 600 developers and so on, then they would just stick with the Foundation repository. But then again, a repository is a place where you define user and group definitions, information maps and report definitions, data source definitions, stored process definitions, and SAS server definitions on all platforms. And to give you a context at this particular client, let's go back to our server and then open up Management Console. Folks, give me 1 second here. I have to bring my mouse, otherwise I can't work with the inbuilt mouse. Give me 1 second, okay? Guys, on the server, I've configured everything to be unrestricted in the sense, when you connect to Management Console, you can use the SAS admin username and password. Again, I'm not willing to give the password out, but make sure that when you're working, don't mess up anything. Okay. Now, any questions so far? So as I told you, of the repositories, after SAS is installed on a server, by default you would see a repository called Foundation. An admin can configure any number of repositories on a particular server. But then again, it really depends upon how many users do we need to support and how many servers they need to support. Like for example, at Chase Line, we have multiple servers. But again, all of these servers are again configured under the Foundation repository. Everything is stored under the Foundation repository. So using the Foundation repository, we can configure many servers, but the only drawback being there needs to be a backup plan for anything, right? So as long as you can handle the metadata backup properly, then having everything under the Foundation repository is okay. But if not, you'll have to divide the repositories. Okay, any questions there?
Sir, is there any limitation on the repositories, like this many users can be, the limitation on the users on this repository?
No, man. I mean, technically, there is no limitation, but the limitation comes when there are a lot many objects to support on each of these repositories. Okay. And I'm saying, as long as you can handle the backup properly, because for a single server kind of instance, it's okay, but on bigger companies, if there are thousands of SAS users, then that will be an issue. Because all the metadata server objects, they reside on the RAM of the metadata server.
Okay. So is there a possibility we can communicate with one repository to another repositories or anything like that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Folks, did you lose my screen share or something?
Yep. You see only SAS BI class 2. Audio conference.
Actually, I think my internet went down.
Hey, Sharath.
Yeah.
So can you give me an instance, why somebody would have multiple repository?
So the instance being, say there are different departments, right? And even in Chase, we have digital, we have market risk, we have credit risk departments, and so on. So all of these servers, they're configured under the same repository. So a person who is an administrator on the foundation repository can look at any data under any of these departments, right? But say if those departments have some PI data and they don't even want the admin to, or not just the admin, but any person who has access to all of the data, if they want to block them, then they will have to bifurcate individual departments into different servers, right? And at the same time, if there are a lot of users in each of those departments, then you need to take a backup of the foundation repository on a daily basis. So if one thing fails because of some issue, then all the departments would get affected with that. So I mean, I personally didn't see any client that is going out of foundation, but then I've heard from JR that Walmart has a big installation. They have thousands of people, thousands of SAS people who are working, and they divide these metadata servers. I mean, repositories. And one other instance would be is instead of using the foundation, some people, some of the clients, they base their dev prod regions accordingly.
So you mean to say even in Chase, the dev is under one repository and prod is under one repository and so on?
No, not at Chase. Chase is all under foundation. Chase is all under foundation repository. I mean, their admin section or the SAS COE is very, very bad. They don't have the right skill set. Man, give me 1 second. My internet connection dropped, and I don't know what to do about it.
So essentially, right, if they don't want, certain departments to access certain data, then they can split up repositories and, make sure, those departments are divided under this repository. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. But you actually are saying about the backup, right? Like, what if the primary foundation server is down? Is there any way, like, we can back it up so that, like, users have access? How does that work?
So what they do is normally they would do a nightly backup, right? When you say backup of the metadata, basically it means that all your job definitions, like say if you've written an ETL job, right? ETL job in the back end, it creates SAS code. That SAS code is written out to a physical disk. But at the same time, the location of where that code is written, that is stored. That definition is stored in the metadata server. So in effect, if you lose the metadata components, you can't easily, bring or you won't understand, how these codes are linked back to the server. And hold that for now. When we see a stored process or something, then I'll come back. I'll revisit this question. Okay. Because that is one place you would clearly see, how a metadata server, actually stores the definitions. Give me 1 second, guys. I need to relocate my computer to another room because the wireless is dropping out. Wireless drop again. All of us. Any other questions so far?
Sharad?
Yeah.
One question about, like, how you separate, like, different environments, like, say for prod, QA, and UAT. So now we know that, like, if you are in dev, you don't have access to prod, and if you are in prod, you don't have access to, like, dev files and etc.
Yeah.
So does that mean that, like, each of them are under one SAS Foundation server but under different repositories?
No. I mean, you could do that kind of an install too, but normally what they do is they put everything under one repository. Okay. They install everything under one repository, but they manage it using another concept called SAS folders. And I could show you when my internet is up, I could show you how that could be done. But again, that is too far. You're still in the basics, and we're just jumping around questions.
Okay. No worries, sir.
But definitely I'll touch that because
sure.
When you're dealing with what happened to my internet. Restart. disconnected my modem.
Are you with Time Warner?
Yeah, man, it's horrible here. I mean, I don't even have another option in my area.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
What about AT&T? You don't have a choice. I think AT&T, they provide service pretty much everywhere, right?
Yeah, it's you know, this is a residential place, nah? So there's not much of a choice here. AT&T DSL is okay, but their maximum speed is 20 Mbps.
Yeah, that's the only downside, yeah.
Come on. What happened? Oh, Jason. Okay. Came up. Coming up pretty soon.
Raj, looks like you guys had good weather today. Columbus, 60s.
It was so windy, Jay.
Oh, really? Okay.
Too much. I couldn't drive my car. It was wobbling like a. If you go above 60, 65, that highway, back. It's too much. I couldn't drive.
Okay, you guys can see my screen, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I was talking about. Okay. Just to give you a little bit of perspective. Okay. Now, whenever you put, say, a data set or something, you register something to your to the metadata server. When you right-click on that particular object, you have something called authorization. In this, you would mention what are the groups or people who have access to read the metadata, write the metadata, check in the metadata, read the actual read to the data set, the actual write to the data set, and so on. So this is how you would control, access to this particular data set or library or whatever it is. And the single point of control is the management console.
Sharaf, the names, right? The customer underscore dim. So what are those? Are they data set or something else?
Yeah, these are data sets.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, say for example, if all these data sets are under one folder, is there any way we can just control that folder?
Oh yeah. Every object has this authorization tab.
Okay, cool.
So you can control at a higher level, and any other objects under these, they inherit at the start. If you want to control at the object level, you go to that object level. Otherwise, if you want to control at one level up, you will have to come back to the folder one level up and give the security permissions.
Okay.
Okay, this is a lot of admin stuff, not in the first class, eventually. Okay, where as I was saying, on the metadata server and on the repositories, that's where you would define who's a metadata identity. Should he be part of a group or should he be part of a role? That is something that you would configure in the repository. Informats, we'll talk about that. Data source definitions, what he means by data source definition is, in SAS, you would write your live name statements, right? So on the metadata, you can define those live name statements standard for everyone using that group. So that is something that you could do with a plugin called Data Library Manager. So under this, I've defined this library called, as an admin, I've defined this library called Orient Star. And I said that, this particular library should be available on the SAS app server. And under the options, I say library is pre-assigned. So when I say that, anyone who opens up an enterprise guide session, if he's part of that group, he should be under the SAS app server. He should have access to that library called Orient Star. Okay, so all of these kind of definitions you're going to do in the management console. I mean, as a dev, you might not do all of them, but if you're a super dev, in the sense you have access to the management console, and then you are the person who is creating these objects, then you probably would have this tool. Otherwise, they're restricted. Earlier at Chase, I used to have management console on the system. I used to configure everything with enough. No. Okay. Anyways, we're digressing a lot. Now, that's the concept behind the metadata server, and every tool that you have, like Data Integration Studio or the Enterprise Guide, add-in, Informap Studio, Management Console, everything is directly or indirectly connected to the metadata server via definitions, and the other servlet containers, the Active Directory, the LDAP or host accounts, or the SAS Connect servers, everything is controlled via or defined via the metadata server. And what I mean by the definition is, I could quickly show you here, is if you go onto the server manager, this is where you would define your SAS app. And you would see on the SAS app, there is one workspace server, there is one store process server, there is a Connect server, there's a batch server, and so on. If you look at the properties, so it's named as SAS app. If I change the name here to SAS app 1 or 2, eventually what you see in Enterprise Guide will also change the next time you log in. Is there any OLAP schema that you want to associate it, or so on, and authorization? And here you can mention who has access to what on the system. It's too much of information on the first class. Eventually we'll get there. But anyways, the management console is the one that would allow you to set all the access controls and so on. Okay, now let's come back to the different tiers, right? At the data sources, you've seen data sets, OLAP queues, SPD, SPD server, web infrastructure platform, and so on. I mean, it's not easy to absorb all of these in the first class. With when you go further, come back to the slide at some point, and when you revisit, then you will understand what are the elements that are going into this particular list. Under the SAS server, we have the metadata server, we have the workspace server, we have the pooled workspace server, OLAP server, store process server, and any SAS processes that we use for the distributed clients. On the middle tier, you would have a web server, a web application server. It basically consists of all of these servers where you can run your dashboards, where you can host your portal, where you can host the Web Report Studio reports and other things. And then the clients add in Data Integration Studio, Enterprise Guide, Enterprise Minor Client, Forecast Studio, Informap Studio, Management Console, and so on. And again, you would have to purchase these clients as well as the servers as a license from SAS. So if you don't want all of these, then you can customize, or your admin can say, okay, these are the tools that our users want to use. So I just need to configure my installation basically to provide only these few clients or servers and so on. So not every client would have all of these components, but this is essentially what an EBI platform can do. Okay. So for example, at Chase, we don't have the model manager. We don't have Forecast Studio, at least not for our group. There could be another group who is more into forecasting. There might be other groups who use Enterprise Miner for predictive modeling or any type of modeling and so on. But again, our license, restricts or defines what are the servers or the middle tiers or the clients that we can have access to. Okay. Now, as far as the SAS BI installation basics go, at the minimum, to say that the SAS BI installation, there should be at least these servers: SAS Foundation server, an object spawner, a workspace server, a metadata server at the heart, and on the client side, an add-in, and obviously the web browser, right? And on the data tier side, it could be an RDBMS table or a SAS dataset. There cannot be an EBI installation if you don't have a metadata server and a workspace server and an object spawner. Because technically, when there's a client, it has to communicate to the to the workspace server. That is where you execute your SAS code, right? In order to do that, it first communicates with the metadata server, passes on your credentials and everything, and then and also with the object spawner to tell the metadata server that, okay, this is the work I need to, or this is the code that I need to process, and that code is processed on the workspace server. Again, the results could be sent back to the MS admin, or it could be stored on the server somewhere, right? So any of those possibilities are possible. So a word about the metadata environment. The metadata environment, at the basic, we need a metadata server. We need a metadata repository. So basically, a metadata repository now is a set of SAS datasets and a lot of Java code that interact. So all these datasets, what do they store? They store your username, passwords. They store definitions to where your code should reside on your hard disk, where your code should run on your server, and all of these. So eventually, in the backend, metadata repository is a bunch of Java code that is running on some servers and a bunch of SAS datasets. If you take the admin class, that would explain what are the different data structures or datasets that store these resources, like users, groups, libraries, sort processes, and formats, server information, metadata access controls, and so on. And again, that's for the admins. Devs don't have anything to do about it, but knowing that is important. Now, the next thing is the SAS Open Metadata Interface. It's basically a lot of code, which are called APIs, that provide access to the EBF platform from a variety of programming environments like Java or .NET or any other web programming thing. So basically, you could think APIs are like macros. Now, if a web service or an ASPX page or a JSP page, if it wants to query certain SAS dataset on your system, right, it has to use these macros to make a call to the SAS dataset. So that is what the API means. And SAS has built its own open metadata interface so that any outside platform application would interact with SAS datasets. Okay. The SAS metadata model is a set of metadata types that are used for saving metadata on the server. So basically, what does a metadata model mean is there are metadata types, like the metadata type could be a SAS dataset. The metadata type could say, it's a stored process and so on. So these are different metadata types that are stored on the metadata server. So, and there's an XML transport format. So basically what it means is when you're trying to move objects from one instance to another instance, say from one repository to another repository, or say from one folder, like say from dev to prod or dev to UAT or something, then all you do is you need to export the objects, and the format that you export is called a SAS package. But eventually, this SAS package is basically a string of XML files. So when SAS, when Management Console needs to export a particular, say, definition of a data set or definition of library, it writes to these XML files. And these XML files can be imported back into, say, a new server instance or a new place, or there could be a few other applications that understand what the XML means. And in order to facilitate that, SAS has come up with this common warehouse meta model. And common warehouse meta model, it is pretty standard to any type of EBI installation. So for example, if there is SAP, ERP, if they want to convert that particular object to a SAS data set, they can. All they have to do is convert into an XML format that can be read by SAS programs as well. That is possible, but then it's too high-level programming languages. Like you need an XML parser to read that code and then read that XML, and that has to convert into that native language and so on. So these are a bunch of APIs, and SAS has kind of adopted this meta model called common warehouse, so that any other, say, like Informatica, could read the SAS dataset information in XML to directly convert that XML information into a table in Informatica. Okay, but you'll have to understand these terminologies, because when you go to the EBI platform, someone would say, okay, promote this particular data set from dev to prod. So essentially what it means is you're trying to transport that library information, export it to a package, and import it back onto the new server as a package. Okay, but in the backend, what it is doing is it's writing to an XML file, and that XML file is again read back into this. So, for example, let me show you a small demo.
So Sharath, like even inside SAS, does this happens? Do we need to convert it to XML and then we have to read it back from XML? If you move.
Okay. The terminology and the backend, it's called the XML format, but in terms of SAS, you just call it as a package. Okay. And let me show you what I mean. Say, let's go back to the folders. Here I have a marketing department, and this particular folder of marketing department has data. Data called customer dem, geographic dem. These are all data sets. Okay. Now think of this marketing department as dev, and think of the sales department as prod. Okay. For example, if you want to move these data sets from dev to prod, physically you can move them and then re-register back to this particular department, right? Or there is another thing called export SAS package. So when we say export SAS package, basically what it means is it's converting that XML transport format. Okay. Now I'm just going to select only the custom dem. Okay. And then so basically, I'm saying, into this package that is sitting on users documents package 1.spk, there's going to be one folder object and one table object. The folder object is data, and one table object is the customer dem. So we are saying, in the new structure, I want this data and customer dem to be recreated. So what you do is you convert that, you see the log. It says, it completed successfully. You finish, make sure, sales department doesn't have this data directory. So now if I go back to the sales department and say, I want to import that. So basically, I'm importing that package element. Come back here. They're saying that it's going to create this data folder and a customer temp. So the original and the target. The high level is Orient Star, so I'm not changing anything, right? Now, if you see back here, you have this definition, customer temp, and the sales department. So this is how we transport these objects from one folder to another folder or from one repository to another and so on. Even when you say a metadata backup, what it's going to do is at the root level, it's going to export a SAS package. It will keep that package on the disk somewhere. If something goes wrong, all you have to do is go back to this higher level and import the SAS package. Boom, everything will get it back. But from the time of taking up the backup till the point where you're retrieving the backup for a new instance, if there is some user logged on to the metadata server and he's doing some, he's creating some new objects, you're going to lose that. So what they do is, at a particular instance, they would just freeze the metadata server. And there are options where you can freeze the metadata server. Freeze in the sense, you go to server manager, logical metadata server, and properties. Not here. Not
Sharath, we have to do something like a store process also. We create something like that, right? Like in the package we create and export and import. Oh, so, the same concept.
It's the same concept. When you're trying to move anything from one location to another location, you would do this export and import.
Okay.
Where is my meta? Oh. So you would connect and then you would pause it. So you see here? So during the time of backup, someone in the admin side, they're going to log on to the metadata server and just hit pause. So what it means is when we hit pause, any code or project that is running via Enterprise Guide or any of these tools, they can't communicate with the metadata server. They just go into the pause mode, and during the metadata backup, everything is backed up into this package, and it's stored on some hard disk somewhere, right? And then they resume. So that that days or say like 10 days worth of metadata, whatever it's written, it's just stored out somewhere, and then you resume it to allow all the jobs that are sitting in queue to start executing. Okay. So that is how a metadata server is paused and a metadata server is paused and so on. So I'm showing you on the backend what's happening. As a dev, you don't need to worry about it, but that is what happens on the backend. Okay, returning back. Now we understand that EBI has the server tier, web tier, the data tier, and the client tier, right? Now think about the distributed processing environment in the sense that your clients are always Windows tier, so all of them, they work on PCS only, not PCS, on PCs only, not Macs or not Linux. They work only on you have Enterprise Guide just for Windows, right? But your backend servers could be Unix or Red Hat or maintains or anything, right? But the metadata server, again, it's up to you. You could put it on a Unix box or you can put it on a Windows box and so on. But most of the time, unless you have a huge amount of users, they try to put that on a Windows box because it's much easier to deal with a Windows box than with a Unix box. Okay. Normally, those metadata servers, they'll have 64 GB RAM or 128 gig RAMs and so on. So that metadata server should be always ready to take up anything, right? So it's more of an in-memory type of server. Okay. So in the BI value chain, when we do some planning or something, you could use something called SAS Intelligence Solutions. For ETL, you would use Data Surveyor, the Metadata Server, the Data Integration Studio, the DI Studio. And when it comes to the storage and everything, you have OLAP queues or SPDS servers, the SAS datasets or anything like that. For business intelligence and so on, you use these tools like Adam or the Web Report Studio, Information Studio, and so on. But for more of modeling and those kind of things, you have Enterprise Miner, you have the high performance forecasting, and so on. And in general, for an end user, you have a portal kind of setup in the EBI platform. Any questions at this point? So let's just talk about, what are the different components and where would they be installed. As you thought, the client tier is always on Windows-based PCs, and the servers could be on any of the operating systems and so on. So to give you an example, here are all the client components. So basically, your laptop as a developer or an admin, they might have all of these client tools. Enterprise Guide is the most used. Apart from that, you have the add-in to Microsoft, the management console, any of the DI Studio or Information Studio, and so on. On the metadata server, normally they are hosted on some Windows-based server, 2003 or 2008 or 2012, whatever it is. The server components would have the foundation, the metadata server. It could have for the client tier components, management console, especially for the admins because they work directly on the servers. They don't work outside from their laptops. They just remote log in into the server and do it from there because it's much, you won't lose anything in the middle. If you lose your session or anything, if you're working on the server, it's going to stay there. If you do it from your laptop, obviously, if you lose connection or internet connection or anything, it's going to corrupt the metadata server. So they always get onto the server. And the data tier components like the method, the repository, and they stay on the Windows-based metadata server. Now, as far as the application components go, they would have the foundation, the workspace server, the stored process server, object spawner, the data batch server. Again, you could have the client-based components. Since it's a Windows-based box, you can have your management console and everything, and the data tier components like the data mart, tables, and everything on your Windows server. Again, this is the app server. There could be another app server. Like when I say SAS app server, you can just imagine if your SAS app SIGPROD is the production box and SIGMain is another box. So you can relate to SAS, this box to be SIGMain and this box to be production. The SAS app SIGPROD and so on. Okay. And this is another application server that might, this particular box doesn't have OLAP processing, but this box looks like it's a high performance box. So someone has installed OLAP server on it, and so on. And the middle tier components, they are normally based on Windows. Again, you can put it on Unix too, but it's hard to find people, who are highly trained to, install something on Unix box. I mean, there are too many processes to check out. So normally what they do is they put it on a Windows box so that any service, if you want to start and stop, you just have to right click. I mean, like I showed you on the server here. For the admins, they just need to right click, start and stop. Okay, for example. Okay, so I'm logged on to SAS1, which is not an admin. So that's the reason why you don't see the start and stop. If you're logged on as an admin, you would see this start and stop highlighted, so you can start and stop. So it's easy to do on a Windows-based box. So that's the reason why most of your web app components are installed on a Windows-based server rather than a Linux-based server. Okay. Any questions till this point? Folks, are you listening?
No question, Sharath. We're good.
Yep. You're listening, sir. Yep.
Okay. I didn't hear Dinesh or Bandhu so far. Okay. Anyways, so when we talk
Sharath, we are here.
Okay. Cool. Yeah. Okay, folks. So when we talk about EBI concepts, right, again, we have seen that there are a lot of tools and so on. Now, let's talk about, what are the different personnel who are involved in this kind of a platform. Like obviously, there are BI users, so basically who are at a higher level, they want to do some reporting and, try to build certain reports or, consume certain reports. So those people are called BI users, and mostly they would use tools like SAS add-in or Web Report Studio or Web OLAP Viewer for browser and so on. So everything is either browser-based or the SAS add-in based. So typically you can think that your business analysts or your product managers, those are the persons who are, regular BI users, or any person of the portal. They are technically termed to be a BI user. So the components that they would use, again, is this bunch. Now, next, let's talk about ETL people. So the developers who are building data structures for these EBI components, right. If there is ETL involved, then they would use a tool called Data Integration Studio. If they are admins, low-level admins in the sense, if they are just defining data libraries and assigning security permissions and so on, then those folks might use Management Console. Then there's another thing called Platform Flow Manager and Platform Calendar Editor. So what these two products are, these are third-party products. They are not manufactured. They're not built by SAS. But I think SAS recently bought them. But anyways, it's called the Load Sharing Platform or something, LSF. I think SAS bought it with, I'm not so sure about this. But again, so these two products are basically used to schedule jobs, ETL jobs. So like we use, what did we use at Chase? We use that Control M, right? So this particular Platform Flow Manager is equivalent of Control M at Chase. Okay. So the ETL developers, their main tools would be BI Studio and SAS Management Console. Now the BI power users. What do you mean by a power user? Power user is the one who develops these reports. So a person could develop a report based on an add-in type of report viewing. He can develop reports using SAS Enterprise Guide, Informaps, using Informaps Studio. Any DI jobs, basically ETL jobs using the data integration tool. So these are the BI power users. And again, all of these clients, they're all Windows-based. You don't have them on any other operating system. Now, the last but the least is the ETL or SAS administrators. So their main thing is management console. Period. If they need to configure certain ETL jobs or something, then they would use the BI Studio. Otherwise, they won't even use that. So these are the personalities in the BI platform, either the BI user or developers. Within the developers, we have ETL-based concepts and report-based developers. And then on the admin side, we have and then if they're dealing with a lot of ETL type of data staging and everything, then you'll see ETL type of administration. Any questions so far? So that is the end of my presentation. We'll break out, and after this, we'll start using our material.